Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much for coming. Welcome everybody to day 2 of the Crypto Valley Conference. We have 4 short keynotes here today, so an hour now on mining and sustainability. And the first one here, we have Ella from Minespider. Welcome.
Hi. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ella. I'm co-founder and CMO of Minespider. And what we do is essentially blockchain traceability for the mining industry. So that's tracking from mine to manufacture, things like gold, cobalt, tin, tantalum, tungsten, all the stuff that goes essentially into your devices, into your electric vehicles, into your jewelry. And we've been doing this, well, more or less for about 5 years. And in that time, like any startup, we've had our fair share of mistakes, fair share of pivots. But today I want to kind of walk you through our thinking about how to make supply chains more sustainable. And maybe a little preamble to this. Supply chains in themselves are incredibly complex, right? They're opaque. Everything that we consume comes from a supply chain, and they've been kept opaque for a reason. That's because middlemen are obviously benefiting from that opacity. So working with supply chains is a bit of a headache to start with, and we'll go into that in more detail. And the second word I want to focus on here is sustainability, which is obviously a word you probably hear thrown around nonstop. What does that mean? What does that mean to you? If I would ask any one of you what is sustainability, I'm sure you would come up with an answer that would be somewhat correct. Sorry, have I got some mic interference here? That's my earring. Shall we pop that out? Not to annoy you. Oh, now it's stuck. There we go. Cool. All right, now it's peaceful. So, yeah, what I was trying to say is that when we think about sustainability, you probably think about ESG. So some parts environmental, some parts social, some parts governance. So everything from deforestation to human rights to lobbying and corruption. And the truth is it's even more complex than that. It varies on the vertical, the industry that you're in, and companies are on a spectrum. They're not unsustainable and sustainable. Most of them have parts that are sustainable, and we're helping them to be higher on that spectrum of sustainability, essentially. Oops, flipped that one. Yeah, so 4 years ago now, we built a blockchain, a very nice blockchain to capture and communicate data. It was a sidechain of Ethereum. Now we built our own using Geth nodes. And we capture company-level information and product-level information and basically just transfer it down the supply chain so that you have this chain of custody by the end manufacturer. Generally, we connect it to the physical world using QR codes, but obviously with like high-value materials like gold, we actually use more advanced tracking mechanisms. So we had this beautiful technology, this blockchain, but obviously we know technology is no good without an application. So we wanted to figure out who is the key stakeholder in sustainability? Who should we be worrying about? Who should we be thinking about when we're starting to use this application? And at the time, we thought sustainability starts with governments, or maybe more specifically, government regulation. Now, my co-founder actually started Minespider with the idea of the Dodd-Frank Act in mind. So there was a section 1502 that basically said if you were sourcing from the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC, you had to do your due diligence. So you had to go there, you had to figure out that your minerals weren't coming from a conflict mine. And essentially, instead of doing that, companies just stopped sourcing completely from Congo. So there was this embargo, essentially. And Nathan, my co-founder, was like, there must be a better way. There must be a way of doing this that we can capture the information that these companies need so we don't, stop supporting and buying from some of the most poverty-stricken areas in the world. And we also, last year, we have the EU conflict mineral regulation that came into effect in January. So basically the same thing for 3TG minerals. So here's me down in Rwanda at a tin mine, at a cassiterite mine, which is one of the elements that goes into tin. And what we did here is basically track tin with all the due diligence requirements to Google and to many of their clients, of Luna's clients in the EU. So that was, I went there for a month. We understood what information they actually already collect. We collected a lot more due diligence documents, and then connect it to their tin ingots using these QR codes on these basically on the blockchain. So that was a success. The product, they still track all this information to this day. But we were left thinking, okay, these guys, they have to provide the compliance data, but they're not actually the ones who use it. Who uses it? Well, That's the downstream brands. That's your Googles, your Ciscos, your Volkswagens. So we decided to target them next. And actually, we went into Volkswagen. Volkswagen was having a couple of issues at the time. One of them was lead. And essentially, we went into their lead supply chains and we tracked, well, we've discovered 1,000 supply chain participants. And just to give you an idea of the scale, they have 40,000 minerals. So lead is just one of them. And we tracked that lead through 13 different supply chains. And most of those supply chains were about 14 tiers deep. Now, lead is also a mostly recycled material, so about 90% of those were like circular loops. But you can imagine now you start to see some of the complexity that you have to deal with when you're thinking about these kind of traceability projects. The next one was tin from Minso's San Rafael mine in Peru. So this is actually the third biggest tin mine in the world. And we tracked that to Google, Cisco, Volkswagen. And we worked with SGS, which is like an assurer, verifier of the data. So again, that was in all ways a success, and we kind of started coming up with these things in the software, like a certificate history tree, so they could see exactly where the minerals were coming from and understand, if you see the little exclamation marks there, this is meaning that it comes from a CARA region, so a conflict-affected or high-risk area. So, companies could start to have an overview of their supply chains and where the risks were. But we still, now we were doing compliance, right? And we wanted to move to the core of companies' businesses. Like, how do we become integral to the operations? And we thought, actually, on the world stage, producers are very much invisible. So they produce commodities, and we wanted to give them an opportunity to decommoditize their products. So if they attach information like traceability, carbon emissions, and so forth, and responsibility audits to their minerals, that they could actually sell them at a premium. At the moment, gold produced in a conflict mine in Africa is sold for exactly the same price as gold from a nice community-run project, say in Peru. So we wanted to decommoditize their products. And for this, we packaged it as a product passport. So actually, you don't have it on these screens, but in a product passport, you also have like a profile of a company. You have videos, you have photos. It's like a beautiful overview of the producer end, so the mine smelter end. And they can track these down the supply chain to downstream clients. Now, the success for us is seeing that some of our clients actually get new clients. So Luna Smelter, which I mentioned before, all their products go out with a product passport now, and they actually have gained 2 or 3 new clients because of them offering this information to downstream clients. For instance, one of them is a recycler that uses the tin slag, which is like a remnant of production in other refining processes in Germany. And the same for Minso, so now all their tin shipments go to Germany with these product passports. And we also have projects, for instance, for copper in Chile, gold in Peru, tin, tantalum, tungsten in Liberia, DRC, and in Rwanda. Okay, but we got to the point here, and actually on the right side, just as a side note, you can see a battery passport. So that's also evolved to support the automotive industry, which we know has a lot of pressure on it to, track everything at the moment and understand how to recycle batteries better. But yeah, we'd got compliance. We'd finally understood why people want to track things, why they want to showcase sustainability. But the question was, for me then, to who? Who are they capturing all this data for? And as a marketer, I use a methodology called jobs to be done. So it's basically, instead of looking at a target market and thinking like, okay, male 45 likes to watch movies at this time of night, that kind of thing, you look at what job they do and you think about what metrics they have to perform on, and basically help them to perform on those metrics. And you think about what their actual job is. So I was thinking, okay, all these people that we work with, these head of sustainability, these CEOs, who are they reporting to? And the answer is actually investors. And we know that money talks, right? We know that any change that truly comes around is probably brought around by money, and I think it would be naive to ignore that. And we also know now that the big change makers, for instance, BlackRock, one of the biggest asset management companies in the world, has kind of said that all of their investments will be ESG friendly moving forward. So we see this entire shift taking place globally, which is really to one of a sustainable world, and not just a greenwash sustainable world, but one of a fully tracked, with complete data, sustainable world. But there is still some issues when it comes to sustainable investment. You'll hear a lot of discussion about ESG metrics and people, in effect saying that they're, again, greenwashing, a different form of greenwashing. But probably the biggest discussion at the moment in terms of sustainable investment is around Scope 3 carbon emissions. So Scope 1 is the direct emissions from your actual operations as a company. Scope 2 kind of takes into account like your energy costs and so forth. And Scope 3 is actually tracking along your entire supply chain. And very, very few companies, I would say, if any, in the world actually know their Scope 3 emissions. But you can think of this as probably the biggest threshold that we have to overcome to reach carbon neutrality. Because if most of production in the world happens in developing countries, right? Because of it's a cheaper cost base, so usually production is pushed to these developing nations, and yet they are not, doing a great job of offsetting, and yet companies in developing countries aren't taking responsibility for their entire supply chains and helping along with that process. So we really see that as the frontier of sustainability, essentially. Yeah, so nowadays our focus is very much on not only tracking the products and the origins of the products and ESG metrics, but really on Scope 3 carbon emissions and helping innovative companies essentially be at the forefront of this world where we have fully tracked sustainable data. I think that is all from me. I still have 4 minutes, so if anyone has any questions for me. I don't know if we're allowed to do Q&A. Okay. Anyone? Yes. So the cost of putting data on blockchain is actually not high at all. Essentially most of these mines will capture information anyway, and if we're actually digitizing it most of the time, they're usually doing it in Rwanda at least, they're doing it in pen and paper. So we're actually also improving the efficiency of their processes. We haven't yet calculated like the ROI or the premium at which they can charge. It's still a bit abstract, right? But we definitely see it, and that they're winning new clients. But I really hope one day we can actually say, you will earn $1 million more a year from having this technology. That's my goal, at least. Yes. Mm. Yeah. Sure. So the question was if we're linking basically like our Scope 3 emissions to carbon credits. Generally we don't at the moment. It's something we could do in the future. I think there's a lot of amazing startups who do that, excuse me, in some format already, and we could probably just connect with them with an API. But it's, you only want to tackle one challenge at one time, to be honest, and traceability is already a big one. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah.
I really love the idea of providing like product passport in order to differentiate between the origins of different products. On what level will you, it's really difficult. How do you enable that? On what level do you do it, like on a company level or on a...
Great question. So you're saying on what level do you enable product passports? So originally we actually did this kind of linear, A to B tracking. Or ABC, let's put it like that. But we found if like party B would drop out, then the chain is broken. So now we actually focus more on kind of like a hub and spoke model. We capture information at company level for companies who participate, and at a product level, to get that traceability. But we believe that like all data is good data. So it's actually more about like just trying to get as much as possible, and less about the super strict linear traceability like a lot of our competitors, I would say, focus on. Great question. So how do we confirm that the material leaving the mines is the actual material going into the blockchain? So this is called chain of custody. So usually this is actually already done by a provider such as Itski, for instance, in Africa. They've come under a bit of fire recently for product laundering, for laundering minerals into the system from the DRC, for instance. What you generally do is you bag and tag at this stage. So you take minerals out the ground, you put them immediately in a bag, you tag it with like a firm tag that can't be removed, and then that's all noted down. That's, well, at the moment we scan a barcode, and that goes into the system, and then it's weighed at the mine site, and made sure that it's the same grade of mineral as well. So it goes to the lab, and you check the mineral composition, because every mine has a very different mineral composition, so you can actually tell very quickly if it's come from another area. So there's some, but obviously it depends on the mineral. For gold, for instance, you have to track it even more thoroughly, because it's obviously got a high price. So that's just for tin, for cassiterite. Cool. Okay, then I'm going to take my earring back, and thanks for having me.
Wonderful, Ella. Thank you so much.